I haven't done so much React on YouTube recently, so this could be nice. All right, let's jump in.
Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome back to our Final Fantasy XIV Retrospect
Hi, Mr.
series.
Happy.
In this series, we take a look at all the old skills in Final Fantasy XIV, so you can see what you missed or what you no longer have to put up with. In our first video, we looked at Bard, and in this video, we'll be taking a look at Dragoon. All of those memes, you know, nowadays, they started somewhere, though technically even before Final Fantasy XIV. Maybe a story for another time. In order to accurately check out all these skills, we're going to need to look back at various web pages from the past. And in order to do that, I decided to use the Wayback Machine. Normally intended to be used to check archived web pages to prevent the spread of misinformation, I'm instead using it to look at why Dragoon has jump memes and always dead memes. Well, at least I'm being productive. If you want to donate to the Wayback Machine, cool website. I include it in the description of all of these videos, as it is an essential tool for dealing with misinformation and accepts donations similar to what you might see on Wikipedia at various times of the year.
All the information in my stream is correct. None of it is fake news, and it is all fact. So never check anything to do with me or what I say on stream and the Wayback Machine, okay?
Either way, we've got a lot to get through, so let's get started. Now, the first question I received after last week's episode is if I could include 1.0 in this retrospect look. Now, I did consider it, and I did go looking with the Wayback Machine to try to find a method of accurately looking at all of the skills and information. Unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot on those days or many web pages that were archiving that information. Gamer Escape, which we used last week, we learned that their web pages used to be very segmented, and that's why last week's Bard episode actually had some missing information about the various skills.
This just looks like any old wiki.
It seems that formatting stayed consistent during 1.0, so in order to actually go through all of these skills, we'd have to click every single page, and the Wayback Machine does take a while to grab this archived information. So what I can tell you is that it was a wild time, but as the video series
in summary,
states, we're going to focus on A Realm Reborn to now.
Yeah,
so in order to overcome that issue with the Gamer Escape early days, we've decided to switch over to using the Final Fantasy XIV console games wiki. I did check their archived information, and it does indeed have accurate descriptions of all of the class and job skills from way back when. The only caveat is that we have to look at the Lancer and Dragoon skills separately, as the Lancer skills are not present on the Dragoon page.
Wait,
Either way, we're going to start with Lancer.
Oh, that's so clunky, man. Fair enough, Mr. Happy. He really put some work into this video. That must have been such a slog. Holy. He must have had like 800 tabs open at all times.
And then I'll quickly tab over to Dragoon, and we can check out those job actions. Now, in case you missed the first episode, the first and foremost thing that the wiki covers is the unlock conditions. Of course, focusing on the fact that it needed Lancer at level 30, but also needed Marauder at level 15. This is a recurring thing that you'll see across the Retrospect series, as this multi-classing system was essential to unlocking the jobs and even performing the jobs at their maximum capacity way.
Who thought of that? Seriously, who thought that up into the game? Yeah, has that existed in any other game? I can't. I mean, to be fair, I don't know that many MMOs or RPGs or whatever, but like, I guess it's kind of an old RPG system, must have just been outdated. I guess my only data point to draw from is probably World of Warcraft. And if I wanted to play Warlock, but it told me that I had to go and level up a Paladin to like half the level of my Warlock, then I'd be kind of pissed. I guess the closest thing there is in WoW to that is Death Knight. The original Death Knight, you had to level up to any class to level 55 to unlock Death Knight. And then you could just start a new Death Knight. So you would keep your level 55, then you would start from level 55 on a new class, right? Because there's no like job changing system and stuff.
Back when you had to unlock cross-class skills, and a lot of the times those skills were your survivability, bonus damage, or other effects that could be useful inside of raids. Marauder in particular would have had a defensive skill, would have had Mercy Stroke, I believe, which is a finisher. You can only use it under a certain percent of health, and can even heal you if you landed the killing blow with it. But just a couple of things. Most of the time you focused on grabbing the buffs and maybe a defensive, depended on the various jobs. Now, looking at Lancer's skills, there's going to be some very immediately noticeable things here. First of all, a lot of these skills you probably recognize.
Yeah, there's
Dragoon
a lot
is one
still
of the
there.
jobs that, while it's evolved and changed over the expansions, it really had this core built on top of things over and over again, and then it's had some quality of life added to it over the years.
That must mean they're like quite happy with the first iteration of Dragoon then, because I mean, most of it's still there, right? Like Feint is not, Keen Flurry, I don't have at least that one. Impulse Drive, I don't know what that is. Heavy Thrust is there, but I think it has a different icon now. Full Thrust. Piercing Talon is the spear throw. Life Surge is the crit buff. Invigorate I don't have. Instantly refill. What's TP? That like a Dragoon mana, basically? Melee mana, yeah, okay. And then I can't see what that is, like minimize? Like this, they just renamed Chaos as, is that what it's called? Chaos Thrust, the dot, right? I miss TP. I started playing 2 months ago. Honestly, having mana as a melee, I mean, you guys saw me play Red Mage. I kept going right? Interesting, okay.
Have True Thrust into Vorpal Thrust, and all the way at level, 26, I believe, is Full Thrust. It's the same 3-part combo you know, and that part at least remained consistent. Feint, however, was a very different skill back then. In fact, I mentioned this in the Bard episode because this is a cross-class skill that they used to use, especially during Heavensward. It was just an attack that had, you know, slow of 20% added to it. So you could use it as a mitigation tool, and during leveling that wasn't infrequently used, but wasn't something you would really use as part of your damage rotation. Keen Flurry is something a lot of Dragoons miss. Parry rate plus 40% for 20 seconds. This was also, I believe, cross-classable, and was not really the most reliable of tools, but hey, when you parried the raid...
It reminds me of, like, evasion for rogues. Except I think that's 100% dodge chance in WoW. This reminds me of, well, it's kind of like, Die by the Sword in WoW, or Retaliation or whatever. So you could technically, like, off-tank something for 20 seconds. If this were a higher percent, this just seems like you said, RNG, right? But this could be cool if it was like 70 or 80%, you could potentially like tank a boss for a good few seconds if you absolutely needed to.
When it was physical damage, you felt good about it. Now, probably one of the most troll things, and I actually don't think it's mentioned here, but Impulse Drive, maybe it's not Impulse Drive that it was on, or maybe it changed at some point. It might have been disemboweled. But you have to remember that there were indeed positionals on some of these skills, and I do see the most important one here is still present. You know, seeing Impulse Drive is actually funny. So if you look at True Thrust and Vorpal Thrust, the combined potency of the two, 150 and 200 makes 350. Impulse Drive, which you get at level 8, deals 180 potency. So 2 Impulse Drives was better than doing your True Thrust Vorpal Thrust combo until you got to level 26. So quite literally, all you did for 20, well, I guess for technically 18 levels, since you get Impulse Drive at 8, was Impulse Drive, Impulse Drive, Impulse Drive. That remained the case for quite some time after.
Why didn't they think about that?
I'm curious to see how long.
And it's for 10 damage or 10 potency.
Leg Sweep, before it was a roll action, had damage tied to it. So you had to be smart enough, I guess I'll say, to know whether you could just use it for damage, like on raid bosses, or when you would want to save the stun for a mechanic. This was true of a lot.
I would be using that for damage all the time on cooldown. Yep. And I bet it's not just me. I bet it's not just me, huh? Yep. Any passing Andys in the chat? Yeah, same. What stun? It says damage. Yep. What's a pass? Oh yeah, I mean damage. I mean just assert dominance over my friends. Just kill the boss quicker is what I meant. Sorry, just to kill the boss quicker, yeah. Had a raid go wrong because our Dragoon kept stunning an ad, make it immune when we needed it. Oh no. I'm surprised you still had stuns left, you know? Boss gets resistance to stuns, you can't stun it. Yeah, exactly. Oh dear. Yeah, like DR or whatever. Okay, let's go.
Lot of different skills back then, but it was never endingly frustrating when you could stun a mechanic to cancel it out, especially during dungeons and even Ifrit hard mode, where it's like very popular.
It's like a ghetto
and someone would just be spamming it for damage and the boss would be stun immune. very, very frustrating.
Yeah.
Probably the most frustrating part about Dragoon or Lancer back then would be Heavy Thrust. Heavy Thrust was just a flank positional skill that gave you a 15% damage buff for 12 seconds. I do believe you get a trait for that later, and we have the traits underneath, which would extend the amount of time that would last. But if you did not land this attack on the flank, you did not get the damage buff. And we didn't have True North or anything like that back then. So bosses turning could just mean you had to use Heavy Thrust multiple times in a row, and it was very indicative of a Realm Reborn design back then. You really had a lot of these maintenance level skills.
That would ruin your combo as well. Because, like, man, I've had this already. Like, I remember a few times in Coils this happened, where, like, just at the time when I was doing my combo with the Chaos Thrust, the boss would, like, turn to... Like, it was still aggroed on the tanks, they still had threat or whatever, but it would turn around to, like, throw a ball of fire at someone, right? So its whole hitbox turns with it, and then it's, like, throwing fire at Ridoran or something, right? And then I'm, like, just pressing Chaos Thrust. Like, I managed to get the True North in, like, just before I get it off or something. But, man, imagine you don't have True North, like he just said there. So you're just screwed at that point. It's like, well, guess I've got to spam Heavy Thrust. Also, flanks as well, like... Do they even exist anymore? Do any classes have flank abilities now, or is it just Rhea? Most melee do. Oh, so even Dragoon still has a flank ability? You will get one? Oh, okay. Okay, I thought maybe it was like maybe only Monk or something. Pretty much all have it. Get ready to love True North. Yeah, because right now, I only have one positional every 30 seconds, so I can basically True North every single one. I'm trying to get out of the habit of doing that. I'm only pressing True North when I need to now. Or trying to get in the habit of that at least. Because I assume later I'm going to need to choose when to do my True Norths. True North, my beloved.
That weren't really core to your gameplay, but were core to your damage output.
Heavy Thrust,
one of the biggest contributors to some Dragoon memes back in the day, but there's definitely ones that are more important. Life Surge, one that's changed, but it still kind of remains similar, ensures critical damage for the first non-magic action used while Life Surge is active. Main reason for that being, of course, with cross-class, you could take some other skills. Damage that will be absorbed as HP up to a maximum of 10%. As you can see, Life Surge has really survived the era. The wording has changed a little bit, and it's become a bit more usable now between the stacks and the changed exact text to make it more usable. But either way,
up to
still a useful skill
of max HP.
Invigorate. I think I covered this during the Bard video. TP. TP was a resource. It was physical MP. There's not really much else to it, but it was a much more strict resource. If you sprinted, you would use all your TP in as a melee. That was no bueno. You really couldn't use sprint as a melee because of that back then. But if you did, you'd better hope Invigorate was off cooldown, or you were definitely doomed. 3-minute cooldown on that to boot. Very, very tough on the TP consumption. If you kept 100% uptime, you just didn't have enough TP on most jobs. You just run.
Is Blood for Blood... Does that still increase your damage taken? Have I been trolling this whole time? Okay. I was just reading it and being like, is this why I was almost dying on, like, the start of the Bahamut opener and stuff? Yep, you've been trolling. What a troll. Oh, thank God. But boy, howdy, that would be funny. That would have been hilarious. I feel like someone would have backseated me at this point already. Yeah, I think someone would have probably been like, oh yeah, Russ, maybe you don't want to pop your cooldowns during XYZ mechanic because you're taking a load of damage. I feel like someone would have said that by now and called me out. Make it cost 25% health. Yeah, we have stuff like that in WoW with life tap and things. Well, we're not anymore, actually. I think they removed life tap completely, actually, now from retail. At least you do more damage because they have inherent downtime. Yeah, that's why min-max, like, that's why uptime is such a huge thing on Melee, right? Because they're designed to, like, they design mechanics sometimes to force you off the boss or, like, off targets and stuff. So if there's ever a time when you can, like, min-max positional movement, like, if you can move a boss a bit slower and stuff, you can tell, like, the difference between a good and a bad tank, at least in WoW. I've noticed this a lot. Like, a bad tank will be like, oh, I need to be over here right now. And then they'll just run as fast as they can, or, like, use some, you know, like a warrior will, like, heroic leap across the room or something. And then the mob that you're attacking, that he's kiting or repositioning or something, will like peg it over to him, and everyone else who's melee like falls behind, right? Because the mob runs faster than you can run, because like that's how they're designed, so you can't just kite them around the room forever. So like a bad tank will just heroic leap all the way to the other side of the room, and then the mob will just run at them, and then everyone else is just sat here like trailing behind, and it's just the worst time ever. But a good tank will just walk over there slowly, so the melee can like keep up time, right? And then overall the ad will die quicker, and the danger, like the threat, will be eliminated. And like they should only heroic leap or something at like the last resort. Peg? We're on the pegging? Wait, what? Who said peg? No one said anything about pegging, guys. You're hearing things. I actually don't think I did. Who said peg? No, I said tank. I said heroic leap. What did? Okay, find me the clip of me saying peg. Yeah, I said it because I read the chat. Sush, peg. You said the tank pegs it. Oh, okay, yeah, I did. Okay, I said he pegs it across the room. Okay, so in the UK we can say, mate, peg it, leg it. And when we were kids, I think we even said egg it. Like you play this game called Knock. We used to call it Knock Ginger. I don't know why, but then it became Knock and Run, which is probably like the more common. I think we just made a British version and we called it Knock Ginger, but it's just called Knock and Run, right? I don't know why it got that name. And then you'd like ring on someone's doorbell. Yeah, ding dong dash. That's another one. Yeah. And then you'd be like, fucking leg it, bruv. So that was it. But sometimes you'd be like, oh, peg it. Like, I don't know how it became peg it, but that was like a common thing. I don't know what the ginger has to do with it. Okay, I don't make the rules. Someone just says, let's play Knock Ginger. And you're like 7 years old and you're like, that sounds hilarious. Now that I'm an adult, that sounds like it'd be the most frustrating thing to happen. Man, imagine, like, we had no empathy back then. But holy shit. Like, being an adult, if someone rang my doorbell and ran off, I would be pissed, bro. Like, I hate when people ding-dong me, you know? Like, even when I'm expecting a package, if they ring my ding-dong, I'm actually just pissed. Like, because I have to, like, stop what I'm doing, and the dog is barking, you know, all this stuff. Why are you guys spamming concern? Ding-dong this. Expecting a package? Like, when I'm expecting a package, yeah, man. Farming concerns, classic. Oh, you guys are too easy. You guys are too easy. Today, Russ learns how many words America refer to penis sex. Why did I read it like that? Oh my god. All right. Editors, cut. Editors, cut.
Every time I join this stream, you're saying the wildest stuff.
No, look, it's the chat. Honestly, the chat is fucking unhinged. They say random shit, and I get like baited into reading like the most unhinged messages, and then everyone's like, "Oh, well, you said that. You talked about pegging." Like, I didn't. I just said like a very normal thing, mate. I said British, we peg it, mate. That's it. Peg it, lads. Exactly. I didn't bait anything. The chat's saying wild messages. I'm just reading my chat. I'm being a good boy streamer. I'm reading my chat, making it worse.
But chat reflects the streamer.
Look, to an extent, yes. However, remember like 1 month ago when this was an innocent, wholesome chat? If you stop every minute, it's going to be a 3-hour video. Look, I'm trying my best. Like, I stopped it to add some content and perspective onto the react, you know? Otherwise, it would be me sitting here watching a video for 38 minutes in silence. I stopped to add some perspective, a good take, and some nice context, and a little anecdote. And then it turned into a goddamn unhinged conversation, you know?
Out at a few minute mark, and then your rotation would be delayed because of TP. Yeah, we went from sometimes having to stop your whole rotation because of TP to needing to time everything in a 2-minute window. It's been a wild change. Phlebotomize, same thing, just a dot that you had to maintain that you got.
I keep thinking he means teleport.
And probably the most notorious skill, what you now know as Lance Charge, used to be called Blood for Blood. It would increase the damage you dealt, but also increase the damage you received. And it was a cross-class skill, so pretty much every physical DPS in the game had it for quite some time.
Wait, so you had 2 damage over times, because you still have Chaos Thrust down here with the combo, with the damage over time. I see it there. And then you also had Phlebotomize. Or another dot. Okay. And it wasn't a combo
there were
one.
No shortage of deaths that would occur because of this skill. And the fact that it was native to Dragoon really didn't help. You do get a trait that reduces the damage suffered from 25% for 20 seconds down to 15%. But that paired with another aspect of Dragoon made Dragoon the living, or I guess not living, death meme that it has been for years. Now, technically, that meme goes all the way back to Final Fantasy XI, and this is only part of the contribution to why Dragoon has the always dead meme.
Dragoons are having a bad time.
But on top of having this native skill that would increase your damage taken when you used it, you also had less magic defense than pretty much every other job in the game as a Dragoon. So raid-wise, just hit you harder. It wasn't uncommon for Dragoons
Sounds like Hunters in WoW.
Die. And yeah, that's not, again, the only reason why. But
they're the fucking Hunters of Final Fantasy. It makes sense now. It all makes sense. They just don't have the health. They don't have the resistance. They don't have the defensives. They just get fucked. Nowhere near as bad as old Dragoon. Magic resist is still a thing. Yeah, like raid-wise, like Hunters just don't have the health or like damage reduction to deal with it in WoW, so they're just constantly dead to the point where people are like, well, Hunters are squishy, I just won't invite them, you know? Hunters aren't as bad in this current patch, but for like the last 2 expansions until the current patch or the previous patch, I think, in Dragonflight, they've been like floor POV. They can be survivable if you play Beast Mastery and you have a Spirit Beast, a Tenacity Spirit Beast, they're okay. Because you have a self-heal. If you can use that, they're pretty good. But even then, I've mained a Hunter multiple times. And I do remember like just dying when I didn't send any mechanics and stuff quite often.
But it really didn't help. Disembowel was a combo off of Impulse Drive, and this one reduced the target's piercing resistance. Despite all the memes, one of Dragoon's most valuable contributions is the piercing resistance reduction that it had. And this was something that was really divisive as it would go throughout the years in the game.
Diabolos.
Essentially, you needed to make sure your job compositions possessed jobs that could overlap these skills. Tanks were slashing damage, and so was Ninja, so you wanted them paired together, which obviously you'd have a tank and a Ninja together. You wouldn't just not have tanks.
It's an interesting
but then on top of that,
layout.
with Dragoon, the only other piercing source was Bard at the time. Eventually Machinist, but I think you get the point. So you wanted a Dragoon and a...
Look, with bars like this, you know he's using leg sweep for DPS. These are like the off globals right here. You know he's using that for DPS right there. He's like, right, that's when my full thrust is up. That's when I can pump damage. And here's my 2 off globals. And then I guess he's got his dives down there and stuff, but I don't know why these are set up in that way otherwise, unless it was just a reminder,
and this is a
like
problem
a weak aura
that you will really come to understand the more jobs that we cover. But the piercing and slashing and blunt resistance debuffs were something that were always a problem because of the way the jobs were released, because of their individual weapon
just used leg sweep
and how frequent
the cooldown's so low.
Various DPS, and it's something that caused endless harassment of certain jobs. Whew, yeah, one of the things they
the cooldown's so low. That's nuts.
Doomspike, AoE in front of you. Nothing fancy to say there. Ring of Thorns, probably one of the most missed skills for Dragoon, often referred to as
someone just said
dance.
About Ring of Thorns.
This was basically just a skill that you would use. It was an AoE skill that comboed off of heavy thrust, weirdly enough.
Interesting.
So you would do your single target heavy thrust into your AoE Ring of Thorns. But on top of that, it was just a point-blank AoE where you stabbed your spear into the ground, spun around it like you were pole dancing. People would spam it in cities, and it was a very, very popular emote for a number of reasons, I want to say. It also cost 120 TP, which was far less than
pole dancing,
but he also had to do the combo action, so it wasn't super common. It was also less potency,
cool.
So, take that as you will. You can also see the small ranges. Look at the radius of 5 yalms. Everything is a small radius.
That's tiny.
10 yalm range, 10 yalm radius, 5 yalm radius. Oh, boy.
The Doomspike must be like 20 now.
as it was back then. Does require you to be from behind in order to deal increased damage, an aspect that still remained consistent today. One of the few positionals I'm surprised has remained the same, but it survived the era. Now, going into the traits for Lancer, since Lancer, the classes where all the traits were back then, most of these are basic, extending the slow duration on Feint, the Keen Flurry parry rate up to 80%, the cooldowns on certain skills like Leg Sweep and Life Surge, the TP restored by Invigorate. Invigorate being a native skill for Lancer,
that's definitely
it was
a damage
better
button
for them than it was for other jobs. That was the benefit you got from playing the main job that a cross-class skill came from. Heavy thrust duration of 20 seconds, so you didn't have to refresh it every 4 GCDs, basically. Now you had closer to 9 GCDs to do it. And then there's the enhanced blood for blood, increase the damage dealt, decrease the damage taken, didn't save them from the means. And then disembowels, piercing resistance up to 30 seconds. They do have the cross-class actions listed down here as well. And among them, you would usually take Second Wind because it was...
So with the subclasses then, are you essentially... Like he said, you had to have Marauder at 15, right? But by leveling it up, is you basically choose an off class you want to level, so you can get access to like a tree of abilities. Is that how it works? You just choose like, oh, I want these skills as my like subclass. Choose up to 5. Oh, so okay, so you could choose like Death Blossom, Straight Shot, Convalescence, and like Haymaker and Foresight or something. Like you can choose any 5 of these. That's really weird. Kind of interesting though. That's kind of cool, so you can make like a loadout. I don't hate that, but I do hate that you had to level up all the separate jobs. Like, I mean, I don't hate it, but I can see how it's quite annoying. But yeah, I guess there would be a cookie cutter build that everyone would just be like, okay, well, these are the 5 best abilities. Take these or you're a loser. So it doesn't actually really add that much. Yeah, exactly. Like Solitaire said, Goad, Fracture, Raging Strikes, Eagle Eye, Mercy Stroke. Exactly. So it's kind of, yeah, exactly. So it's kind of pointless. Yeah.
And then the rest kind of depended. Sometimes you could justify the TP cost of Fracture during very specific things. That was a Marauder dot skill. You could pretty much avoided taking things like Provoke or Flash or Savage Blade, Featherfoot, Foresight. You very rarely took those. Bloodbath for survivability and Mantra for the AoE healing were more common uses there. And then it also goes into Archer and Rogue. Now, keep in mind, we are looking at Lancer.
Oh, wow, you
so
can
I really
get
shouldn't go
anything.
too into this because Lancer has more access to cross-class skills. That was one of the advantages you had for still playing a class. However, we still have the Dragoon skills. Jump, Elusive Jump, Spine Shatter Dive, Power Surge, and Dragonfire Dive. Now, most of these you recognize, and they do similar things.
Increase the damage dealt by 1 jump or Spine Shatter Dive. Oh, Spine Shatter Dive. Yeah, you just use that on jump then.
Elusive Jump, still jumps backward, removes heavier binds, reduces enmity.
Every other
Spine
jump.
Shatter Dive, still a gap closer. It was a stun back then as well. I don't think it has the stun anymore, but it's been
Elusive Jump.
We'll find out in this video.
3-minute
Jump,
cooldown.
Still the same thing, return to your original position. Power Surge was just a jump buff, increase the damage dealt by 1 jump or Spine Shatter Dive by 50%. So you'd use it on jump because jump is 200 potency versus the 170. And then Dragonfire Dive, which is similar to what it is now, just the potency change. Very small radius again. The only big thing with jump, Dragonfire Dive, and Spine Shatter Dive is the animations were so slow. You would just, if you press these at the wrong time,
I think it's even worse in 1.0, right?
And it can still be griefing now. It was 10 times more griefing back then. You had to be well aware of the mechanics like 10 seconds in advance to know that you could or couldn't jump, because you could not reactively make that decision based on what was happening. And you could not play fast and loose with a lot of the AoEs and mechanics.
It's like
realistically, the only thing actually...
It's like powering up a limit break or something.
Lost here is Power Surge. So that's kind of baked into Life of the Dragon, or was baked into Life of the Dragon. So not really too much lost there. Now, looking at the proper skills, a lot of the things I said still hold true. Second Wind, Internal Release, Mantra, Bloodbath, and Mercy Stroke were common takes. Fracture was a possible take if you really wanted to over Mantra, but you needed to be very sure about when you were using it, or you would actually just burn through your TP way too quick. Now, we're not going to go into the PvP actions, but you get an idea of the Dragoon. It was had more health, but it was flimsier between blood for blood, which all the melees, all the physical DPS used, but Dragoon had it baked in. And
seems a little bit clunky,
Lord
but
magic defense just made it a huge problem.
It also doesn't seem the worst.
They also died a lot because of the jumps and just people not having the forethought about when to use it or when they were learning new fights. And other than that, it had some positional flaws. You know, the heavy thrust memes were super real. If the boss turned and you weren't aware if the boss automatically turned for a mechanic, it was such a huge problem. That being said, Dragoon, once you had a little bit of gear to get through a raid tier, it was very, very strong and very popular. Not to mention, until patch 2.4, it was only one of the 2 melee, so you usually had one of each. If you were going to run double melee, 1 Dragoon, 1 Monk. Not that uncommon. That being said, it also empowered Bard, which was generally considered to be a really strong job throughout much of the first 2 expansions. So you always had those 2 together. They were just like peanut butter and jelly. But that covers all of Lancer and Dragoon for a...
Now, don't hate on me for this, NA. Is that a no-brainer, peanut butter and jelly? I just don't know how that even came to be. There's no way someone went, this makes sense. I know, like, once it caught on, it makes sense, right? I have never, ever had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I've never even seen someone eating one. Unsub. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. Before you all unsub and unfollow, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, how did this come to be? Like, he's like, oh, it's a no-brainer, peanut butter and jelly. Like, who thought this up? Someone was smoking some crazy shit one day, and they were like, you know what? Just makes sense. I'm sure it probably tastes really good, or it wouldn't be, like, renowned as the best sandwich combo of all time in the US, right? But in the UK, I've never even seen someone eat one. I've never had one. I've never seen it sold in a shop. I've never ever seen it in person. I've only heard of anecdotes of, like, America, basically. Savory, sweet, dry, and wet. I mean, I'm a contrast enjoyer, so it makes sense in my head. I do need to try it sometime. It does sound messy, but then again, it's so is like a cream and jam on scones, right? Okay, guys, we're doing the video, all right?
Better for Dragoon, but in a different way, I think. So now as we go into Heavensward, the class page is a little less useful, but the job page is really where we'll see some of the new stuff we get to talk about.
Impulse
we can still look
drive.
at some of the wording of the skills, but because class skills stop at level 50 and still to this day do, then it's kind of a hard thing to judge much change on. You know, most of these skills are still the same. 2 impulse drives are still better than true thrust and vorpal thrust at the early levels. You do see some of the other things, like the wording change here. We start to see that on Life Surge. Now it says next weapon skill instead of non-magical attack. We also see a few other kind of, I guess, formatting changes for the website, saying the combined total for the damage. We didn't actually have that in the potency, but we still had...
Still very low ranges.
Piercing resistance, we still had Doom Spike, still had Ring of Thorns, Disembowel, all this stuff. Like, most of this stuff remained the same, and you can even see it going into here. I remember a big complaint was that we didn't get traits when it came to the new job levels, level up going to 60, because traits were tied to classes, and they stopped adding class skills at 50, so they just didn't add traits. We really didn't get new traits, I think, until...
So not much change in Heavensward.
I think it was Shadowbringers where we really actually got job-related traits again. So all of our changes are more accurately represented on the Dragoon page for Heavensward. Now, we do have, you know, still jump...
Battle Litany. Increase critical hit rate for self and party members by 15%.
Elusive, Spine Shatter, Power Surge, Dragonfire Dive. We weren't at the point yet where they were really changing or reducing or removing old skills. Minus a couple. We'll see some across the jobs, but it wasn't like a super normal thing like we kind of experience
That's
it
true.
now. But most of this stuff at this point had been adjusted in some way. Jumps were a little faster, you know. The magic defense, I don't remember if magic defense was fixed. I think magic defense was fixed in 2.45. Right, yeah. So in the middle of Final Coil, the magic defense issue was resolved. So at this point, this isn't a meme anymore. We're way past that meme point when it comes to Heavensward. But now we have the 52 to 60 skills. And Dragoon made out like a bandit, but it was still kind of a tough time for them outside of Reclear and Prague. There was a reason that they were frequently used. We'll talk about that since we talked about Bard last week.
I recognize these abilities from PvP though. Gerkeskul and wheeling thrusts. I recognize these, so maybe I'm gonna get these soon.
The litany, survive the ages. Why fix what there's nothing wrong with? Crit rate, always strong in here. It's really no different. Blood of the Dragon was the big thing they got in Heaven's Ward, though. Now, back when it was first introduced, and even up until recently, it was actually a button you needed to press and you needed to maintain. You wanted to get the most out of any individual Blood of the Dragon. So when you activated
look at the channel.
your job was then to maintain it so that it never wore off. And if it did wear off, you needed to make sure it didn't wear off until at least 60 seconds had passed. Because if you
Is this Breath of Sindragosa for Dragoons?
didn't, then you'd go without Blood of the Dragon for some time. And no game was very similar with Black Mage, and we'll talk about that in that episode, but it made for a very rigid feeling Dragoon. Increases the potency of jump and spine shatter dive by 30%, so you had this permanent damage buff to your jumps, but it also granted access to your combo skills of Sharper, Fang, Sharper, Fang, and Claw, and Enhanced Wheeling Thrust, which would allow you to continue the combo into the 4- and 5-part combos that we still know today. Now, back then, it was not as set in stone. You didn't just roll from every Chaos Thrust would go into the same combo, into the same part 4 and 5. Back then, you had to react to which one procced. You had to see, oh, I got Wheeling Thrust. Oh, I got Fang and Claw. Now let me do that.
Minigame, whack-a-mole.
You were going to get it first. I don't remember when they fixed that, but it was very, very scary.
Well, that's pretty rough because it's a flank. Like, one's a rear and one's a flank ability, right? So it's whack-a-mole, and you got to adjust your positioning accordingly. Interesting.
End upon reuse of Blood of the Dragon or using any skill. So if you repress Blood of the Dragon while it's already up, then you would just outright lose those skills. Then for Fang and Claw and Wheeling Thrust themselves, you know, Fang and Claw, the flank skill, and Wheeling Thrust, the rear skill, and they would increase the duration of Blood of the Dragon by 15 seconds each, so you had to be careful. If actually, so I'm trying to think, I might be misremembering, because it says, grant Sharper Fang and Claw or Wheeling Thrust when completing a combo with Chaos Thrust or Full Thrust. I don't think we had 5-part combos yet here. I'm trying to remember. You know, let me look at the traits, because we might have only had 4-part combos, and it might have been random which one you got. Because I think that you actually just flowed between the 4 skills and it was random which one you would get. So you had a random positional at the end of every 3-part combo. And man, that could sure suck depending on the part of the fight. Otherwise, they were both the same potency, served the same purpose, just 2 different skills, kind of like they do now. And then, of course, you had Jerskogul. Now, this was just an OGCD you could only use when under Blood of the Dragon. And
so it reduces the duration by 10 seconds. So I guess if your duration was really long, you could offload some of it. So it's like a balancing act. That's so interesting.
It reduced the duration of Blood of the Dragon by 10 seconds. So you could use it every 10 seconds theoretically, but because you were only feeding up to plus 15 seconds on Blood of the Dragon with Fang and Claw or Wheeling Thrust, and it took 3 GCDs to get to these, and then the 4th to actually execute them, you had to be very careful about your Jerskogul use. You had to know if you could use it or not use it and lose Blood of the Dragon.
Yeah, 25 seconds or higher.
Really bad time.
Duration
it could cause you a lot of issues. So it used to be that Blood of the Dragon was maintained. You'd get your jump buffs. You never wanted to lose it, but you needed to make sure you were pulling off as frequently as many Jerskoguls as you could. And if you didn't, you would just do less DPS. So you'd see Dragoons who were less comfortable forego using Jerskoguls.
That's a nice little skill cap, though.
Just to make sure their timer was okay, because they didn't want to actually lose it. Whereas more experienced Dragoons would play closer to the cuff on Jerskogul and try to make sure they could get the maximum number of them as that they could. That was the big thing. But other than that,
I guess like over time you would work out like roughly how frequently you can. What did he say? It's 4 globals to get the extension, so that's 10 seconds. So you could get 15-second extension every 10 seconds. So if you play perfectly, you can basically just use this on cooldown, right? And you just have to double check that you're not below like 15 seconds when you use this, or you'll be fucked with your Blood of the Dragon. Not too bad.
The job still had the memes with the jumps. It was faster, yes, but it still wasn't that much better. And Blood for Blood could still be a problem, but the enhanced magic defense definitely helped cauterize that issue a little bit, especially because Dragoons had more health.
Yeah, I didn't have
so now they had the same magic defense, but they had more health, so they kind of had the room to use Blood for Blood. Whereas other jobs still were a little afraid to use it, but it was expected that you would use it, maybe click it off even. if the time came.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, there's no. I just realized there's no traits. Why did I say that? I just finished saying for Lancer that there's no traits for jobs yet. Yeah, I think it was just a random one. I think in Stormblood it flows from one into the other, and that's where they made the change. But at this point, you can see that.
To be fair, I haven't played Dragoon with a job gauge. I don't know if I even get one or not, but I could imagine that wouldn't be too hard to see. Like, I could still track that now, but I would probably make some mistakes now and then, you know. But yeah, if there's a gauge, it makes it even easier. Shame there's no weak auras though, like you said.
Dragoon is just built. You recognize most of the tools. You can see it didn't really change drastically from the previous iteration, and now we get to go into Stormblood and see how they built on top of that. All right, much like the last time we were here in the Bard video, starting in Stormblood, Final Fantasy XIV had a job guide built into the website. And we are looking at the update on January 8th, 2019, which would have been just a few months before the release of Shadowbringers. Now, we do see one major change right off the bat in the combo potencies of True Thrust and Vorpal Thrust. 410 potency when combo together, although that might be representing what you have after traits.
I hope
we should take a look at that now, but I do think that issue was resolved by now. We do see some other things, and we do see that there are no traits for that anymore because there's no longer a flood of traits to begin with.
Cool that they made a website.
Vorpal Thrust being worse than Impulse Drive was fixed by this point. Heavy Thrust still here, only 10% increased damage, but a 30-second duration. So you still needed to maintain that, but it was no longer as difficult to maintain, and it lasted.
So this got baked into Disembowel. I see now where they're going with it.
Way longer, a trend that of course we still see to this day with buff duration. Things like dots that do still remain and other buffs you need to maintain are normally built with the rest of our rotation and what we need to be doing in that time a little bit more in mind. Life Surge, still the same thing. First weapon skill used when Life Surge is active and the healing is done. The potency numbers being way up now, all the way up to 450, up from 360.
Oh, they nerfed the damage taken.
And that's been a problem that's been occurring. They keep raising the potencies on some skills, and the numbers get so high on some of those skills to give us those big wow factor. Oh my god, look at all the damage I did. But it's creating those kind of crit variables that we've talked about in a lot of other videos. The variance in damage getting a little too high, and Stormblood really started to push us in that direction. Blood for Blood, they had massively nerfed at this point. Only 10% damage suffered, and at this point,
15%
we do not
damage
have cross-class skills anymore. So I believe this is a job-exclusive skill at this point. I'll have to double check that when we go down, but I think cross-class
better than it is now. It's 10.
Given that I remember we had like arm's length for Omega and stuff, and it was very important. Jump still, they were still making improvements on it, but I don't think it's ever not been a meme. The big thing is granting dive ready, which I'm sure you recognize from the more recent skills. We of course have elusive jump still being disembowel, still reducing piercing resistance, but now only by 5%. That would be gone entirely in the following expansion, but they drastically reduced its effectiveness. That didn't change people's minds on how much it needed to be.
Oh, I see Impulse Drive now. So you had two separate three parts. It was like, now you have what's the first thrust called? Just something thrust. And then you can either go into Disembowel or to Vorpal, right? But they had a separate first part of the combo. That was what Impulse Drive was for the Disembowel combo. Interesting.
Composition. Doom Spike still an AoE. Spine Shatter Dive now has grants dive ready, so you had both jump and Spine Shatter Dive granting dive ready. So this was back when Life of the Dragon was a little bit more busy than it is now. Getting to it was busier, using it was busier, and a lot harder for newer Dragoons to maintain. Chaos Thrust still, you know, I don't think that's changed. I don't think I need to say anything at this point. Dragonfire Dive, potency gone up. Battle Litany, I think they changed. Maybe, I know the cooldown's 3 minutes.
Blood of the Dragon.
Yeah, I think it's largely the same. Blood of the Dragon, still the increased damage, still the base duration. This time now only a 30-second duration, so if you screwed up earlier, you could fix the problem quicker, but it still had to be used, and it still had to be maintained. You didn't want to lose it under any circumstance. And it still does the Sharper Fang and Claw, but now instead of granting one or the other, it grants specifically Sharper Fang when executing full thrust or Wheeling Thrust when executing Chaos Thrust. So this is where we had it's no longer random worked in. And on top of,
you know what this reminds me of? Sinful Brand Demon Hunter from Shadowlands. It doesn't remind me of Breath. It reminds me of Sinful Brand. And you'd get massively punished for uptime. Yeah, and the thing is, at least this is like on your character and not on your target. The Sinful Brand would die with your single brand. So imagine Blood of the Dragoon. This is a playstyle there was at the end of Shadowlands for Demon Hunter in WoW, right? Imagine Blood of the Dragoon, except you can pick one target for it to go on. And if your target dies, it's gone. Or if your target, like, you know, despawns or runs across the room or whatever, you can't just switch target and continue doing it. It's gone. Like, this seems a bit better. That's how, like, Sinful Brand playstyle should have been, if they're going to have that, right?
That the comboing together, which I already, as we peeked down at the traits, I did see that trait was there. Effect ends upon reuse or upon, yeah, and then that's just the warning for the enhanced skills for accessing the 4th and 5th combos. Cannot be executed while under the effect of Life of the Dragon, because why would you be able to? That was the next evolution, was Life of the Dragon. Other than that, Fang and Claw, you know, now 300 and 300 for each, them and Wheeling Thrust, and they would, of course, combo together. They both also extended Blood of the Dragon's duration by 10 seconds, but because you were doing a 4 and 5 part combo, it was essentially 20 seconds added, just 2
each
GCs
combo
back to back. Skogul no longer reduces the duration of Blood of the Dragon as of now. It can still only be executed under it, but no longer reduces it. However, it'll change you from Blood of the Dragon to Life of the Dragon with a dragon cost of 3. So now we only have the 2 because only
dragon
is
cost
involved in Mirage Dive and Dive Ready. But back then, you had the potential. You had the 3 dragon eyes in order to access it. But otherwise, it was still functioning similarly. Now it has a 30-second cooldown instead of the 10 seconds. And of course, we all know what happens to Skogul when Life of the Dragon is activated. Sonic Thrust is just a combo off of Doom Spike. Does indeed extend Blood of the Dragon as well. This is where they got Dragon Sight at level 66 also, which has
delivers an attack with a potency of 100 to all enemies in a straight line. Combo action, Doom Spike, potency, increases Blood of the Dragon. Right, so you just alternate Doom Spike, Sonic Thrust, I guess. And it gives you blood. Alright, it seems like pretty hard to drop the Blood of the Dragon if you're not playing, like, if you don't die or you don't have to move out of range for a significant period of time or anything. Seems pretty okay.
Has always been a bit of a problem to use. Now we have the massive range on it, so that way it's not as annoying to use. We also don't actually have the tether. But back then, you know, you had the short tether, the 12 yalm tether. You had to make sure that, you know, you had a macro for targeting a specific person or a mouse over macro or something like that. Was a pain, still a pain. Curious to see how it'll do when we get to 7.0. Mirage Dive requires Dive Ready then just strengthens the Dragon Gauge by 1, pretty much the same way it works now. And then Nastron, which Skogul becomes Nastron when you enter Life of the Dragon and has a 10-second cooldown, pretty much the exact same functionality as it has now.
Oh, this is Giga AoE.
This is where we were introduced to roll actions. No longer were your actions borrowed from other classes that you had leveled. You were just leveling Lancer to get to Dragoon, and then you would actually use your roll actions to determine what you could do otherwise. And most of these you'll recognize. You have Second Wind, which it was just your personal heal. You had Arm's Length, which you would use to nullify knockbacks. This is where that started to become a lot more standard, everyone being able to mitigate knockbacks with their built-in skills. And so a lot of the mechanics, they were never really built for it. We've only had, I think, 1 mechanic in the entire game that's ever required these things, but it made for a lot more interesting strategical use now that it was so much more accessible across the various classes. However, Arm's Length is 60 seconds. I believe when we get to the casters, there's some sort of discrepancy between this and Surecast. I think Surecast still required you to not cast another spell.
They took the damage off Leg Sweep now.
So I think that difference is still there. But yeah, Arm's Length, great tank cooldown, great for mitigating those knockbacks, just great. Leg Sweep, no longer part of the class actions, now a roll action, just stuns with no damage associated. We still had enmity control back then, so now DPS had diversion. Instead, you used to have to take... Oh, that was the skill I was forgetting about when we talked about the classes. I'm sure somebody was already called.
So, did you used to have like enmity meters? I guess you just had to watch your enmity that you didn't over aggro the tank, right? But now they kind of standardize it, so like it's really, really hard to pull aggro off a tank, yeah? That's kind of how they did it in WoW. Like back in the day, you used to have to like really watch your threat, otherwise you just get one banged. And not many classes had abilities like this where you could like drop threat and stuff. Like I think only rogues, hunters. I think it's just rogues and hunters actually.
Calling me on that. Going back to Dragoon. Oh, actually, did they not have? Oh, they didn't have it back then. So some classes had access to quelling strikes. I believe actually Black Mage and Bard would have been the only
ones
heard
that
back
name?
in Realm Reborn. And it reduced your enmity. So those classes had decent enmity control. The melees, on the other hand, did not. Dragoon, fortunately, had the backflip, and they could just use the backflip to reduce enmity if they ever needed to. But now they also had diversion built in, reduces enmity generation on a 2-minute cooldown, and you were pretty much using that on cooldown.
Oh, the backflip
same deal, restores TP. Now a roll action, so you don't get the bonus 100 TP. So Dragoon lost a little bit of TP management there. Bloodbath, just healing yourself. Goad, which was the rogue skill, would allow you to refresh the TP of a single party member.
Back to full.
It's weird. I don't really remember that being used.
So you need a buddy
as a class. I think as a roll action,
to goad you.
Not very good. But I mean, I have to. No, people definitely did. I remember people trading goads and things like that between physical DPS.
No one used
or double melees would just trade goads between each other. I vividly,
that's what I would do.
Maybe not so vividly. I somewhat remember that being a thing. But you can see there's no like damage cooldowns here anymore. You have True North for the positional requirements. You have
True North, my beloved.
Bind in heavies from target party members other than yourself. So it was not a cleanse. It was a dispel on a teammate. And then Feint, which was the form that is now lower strength and dexterity by 10%. You took this for auto attacks, and you took this for any physical raid wides, but it wasn't something everyone just unanimously took. There's a lot of value in some of these options.
You have
Second
to
win,
choose
super
it.
common, arm's length. You would frequently see people forget to set. You could only set 5 of these. If memory serves. No, both jobs and classes can select and use up to 10. Oh, never mind, up to 10. I thought it was only 5. Oh, so then 1, 2, 3, 4.
I mean, there's
5,
not
6.
even 10
Okay,
there.
so you had all 10. I don't know why it says up to 10 when you have 10, so you might as well just say you can equip them all. But there were people who would just forget to have arm's length on their bar. That I remember very well. It's like, oh man, I forgot to put arm's length back on my bar.
Really good, actually.
10 bonus actions that people had to create keybinds for, and that was a disaster. Then moving on to traits, Lance Mastery. This was the one that allows when the execution of Wheeling Thrust after landing Fang and Claw, or Fang and Claw after landing Wheeling Thrust, and increasing the potency by 100. So this was the 4 and 5th part combo. This just explains how Life of the Dragon works, which is very similar to now, except that it was 3 units, and the Spine Shatter dive had Mirage dive ready. But still, you get the idea of how simple the job was. And how
so, wait, I need to see this again.
But still, you get...
So it's True Thrust. So yeah, now you have True Thrust, Vorp or Vol, or True Thrust, Disembowel, Chaos. So they just removed this as like a button bloat, right? And now this just goes in 2 ways, basically. And then this is still, I imagine, still a thing. So they just got rid of 1 button because it was like kind of useless.
Get the idea of how simple the job was and how it was still just building upon what already existed. And that continued into Shadowbringers.
They really built it up from the beginning with the same idea, though.
This was the last update before the Endwalker expansion on April 13th, 2021. Man, it feels like ages ago, but it's really not that long ago.
That is not long ago.
And
that's in COVID.
Man, can you see the potency changes here? Look at True Thrust, 290 out the bat. Think about where we were. Look at this, 150. That's almost double what it was
base
before.
Damage.
Oh, that's the Endwalker one. We don't need that one at the moment. It's 290 now. Not to mention at this point you have Raiden Thrust to, which was a positional, so you had to make sure that you hit it. But
yeah, Dragoon, like they really built up from the ground.
We had Life Surge still, first weapon skill,
I like that. I
still
respect
absorbed
that.
HP, like all of that is still relatively the same. The piercing resistance went away in Shadowbringers. Now it was just increased your own damage dealt by 10%,
now, I think.
Something that has remained true. So you want to make sure that you maintain that buff so that you are dealing more damage. So you're only focused on yourself and no longer increasing team damage at this point. Lance Charge now, no more blood for blood, no more increasing your own damage taken. This made for a lot more consistency when designing raids and mechanics, so it was a good change. Jump is still jump, dive ready is still dive ready, and now elusive jump doesn't reduce enmity. At this point, enmity wasn't really a problem. The tanks had to juggle it, but it was no longer something that was a part of the DPS responsibility. It was placed entirely on the new tank stances that were introduced.
This when you got Shirk. No.
Spine Shatter Dive has the stun removed from it. It no longer has that component. Doom Spike and AoE still. Chaos Thrust. Again, still pretty much the same. The potencies change, but the skill remains the same. Dragonfire Dive, same thing, 380 potency.
Yeah, they really just nailed the theme now at this point,
on
right?
Battle Litany, so took a little bit of a hit there. And Blood of the Dragon here, it now increases high jump and Spine Shatter Dive because jump becomes high jump at the higher levels, and otherwise functions very similarly. It only has a 25-second recast, but you still need to maintain it, which is still not much of an issue. It also only has a 10-second base duration instead of a 15-second one, but that just means that you activate it a couple of GCDs, I believe, into the opener. I don't think you pre-pulled blood or anything like that, or you did it on the first. I think you did it on like the second or third GCD, but it's been a long time since I've looked at the Shadowbringers rotation for Dragoon. Fang and Claw and Wheeling Thrust still pretty...
Honestly, this video, I'm really enjoying it. I know it's like, I don't know, maybe it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm really enjoying hearing about like the history, because someone who's like only just joined into the game, right? Especially as like this is the class I've been playing the most. It's really... Honestly, I really like that they've kind of kept it pretty much the same theme throughout the entire duration. I know some people said that they would think like they heard down the grapevine or something they were going to rework Dragoon, but I don't know. I don't feel like they need to really. Maybe it's just positionals, right? Yeah, it's quite enjoyable. I'm looking forward to watching some more of these. Honestly, Rafan, I agree. Like I really distinctly remember when I was like trying to work out like how many targets do I AoE, right? And you just straight up add up the potency numbers because they're like pre-multipliers, like pre-gear multipliers, pre-damage bonus multipliers and stuff, right? So it's just like, okay, here's a really arbitrary number with the potency, like, 340. You can just bang that into a calculator. It's not like, delivers 121,247 damage, and then this one does like 13,040, like 411, and like shit like this is like really annoying to work out. Potency, you can really like eyeball it really easily and just be like, okay, yeah, that one's like this combo would do 900 and this combo would do 840, so I'm going to use the 900 one. Like, it is quite intuitive in that way, and I really like that.
Pretty much the same, extending the duration of Blood of the Dragon, comboing off of each other. Jir Skogul, still pretty much the same, changing blood to life, and yada, yada, yada. It becomes Nastron, Sonic Thrust, Dragon Sight. All of this still functions pretty much the same. And then you have Nastron there. Now we have the new skills. Korthan Torment, the third part of their AoE combo, also extends Blood of the Dragon's duration. High jump, which was faster than regular jump, so it did make your life a little easier, but everyone, of course, still died. Well, not everyone, but you know, it wasn't uncommon for it to happen.
A jumping attack.
Raiden Thrust.
With 400 potency, returns you to position. Dive ready. So wait, is it... Oh, it's just a better version of jump.
After you get Raiden Thrust ready, which is a trait, so I guess we'll leave it. But essentially, if you hit your positionals on Wheeling Thrust and Fang and Claw, you'd get Raiden Thrust for the start of your next combo. It wasn't part of the Endwalker mechanic that you have now. It was just bonus damage at the start of your combo as a reward for hitting your positionals. And then that was when we got Star Diver, the big AoE that we have now. You could use it once every life. It pretty much has remained the same functionality since then.
Huh? Star Diver delivers a jumping fire-based attack to target and all enemies nearby with a potency of 600.
That we have now, you could use it once every life. It pretty much has remained the same functionality since then as well. Roll actions, these are just now all the actions that you have.
There's only 6 now, down from 10
for whatever reason. And these you should all be familiar with. These really haven't changed. True North, Arm's Length Feint, Bloodbath, Leg Sweep, and Second Wind. Now going on to traits, now we actually got traits for Dragoon. No longer class-based traits, but just traits that were impacting the job itself. Life of the Dragon was now 2 units instead of 3, but otherwise functioned mostly the same. The biggest change, of course, Spine Shatter Dive no longer having dive ready meant it's a lot closer to what you have now. Jump Mastery upgrading the high jump, this increasing the potency of True Thrust to 290. These always read super weird because it's increasing the base potencies of these skills. But it's also increasing the comboed potencies by the same amount. So this is plus 40 and plus 50. So that's how it ended up affecting them. But then here's also Raiden Thrust. If Fang and Claw is executed following Wheeling Thrust or vice versa, while adhering to directional requirements. What an annoying way to get to Raiden Thrust. But that's how you did damage. That's what you made sure to do. Extend the duration of blood and life to 30 seconds. At base, they were not that. They were, I want to say 15 seconds instead. But now you can just get all those extra Nastrons. Of course, you had the Star Diver. So Life of the Dragon and Blood of the Dragon were just made to be a lot more simple. And by the way, when it says extends the duration, I believe that means the base duration. When you actually press the button, it said 10 seconds before for blood. Pretty sure that made it 30 seconds just at base. But other than that, I mean, this Dragoon's just the pinnacle of consistency. I mean, honestly, I don't even need to do a cutaway because Dragoon's, I mean, this is just what we have now. Do I need to tell you? I mean, last week I said the same thing with Bard, that we really don't need to look at all this stuff because you can log into the game and look at it now. But you just have such an idea of the consistency, and it's why we have a major concern. Well, I don't, because I don't care. But
before he talks about his major concern, can I just say, Mr. Happy is fucking insane. He did this in one take. He just made this whole video in one take, and he didn't stutter or anything, dude. What a goddamn Giga Chad. Absolute legendary creator right there. Sheesh. I'm pretty sure I didn't notice any cuts. Yeah, I mean, he's been doing this for like 10 plus years, to be fair. Fair enough. But damn, I wish I can do that one day. I do my streams in one take, though, to be fair. He's always full steam. Yeah, he's getting to the point. Yeah. Sure. Barely.
Dragoon mains do. The job is being reworked on 7.0, and according to Yoshi P, it is going to be a 5.1 ninja level rework. When we do the ninja episode, maybe that will make more sense. Okay. But that was something that was generally considered a good change. It took some of the clunkier things or more difficult things about the job, streamlined them so that they were still part of the job, but that they were more directly part of your rotation. And you honestly, the job, it was indistinguishable that it was different other than the feel of it as you were pressing the buttons. It was a lot more ninjutsu focused, was probably the biggest change. And so for Dragoon, maybe it just means you're a lot more jump focused, but they might work the jumps into your main rotation instead of them being off globals. That's as good as my prediction is going to get.
So they are doing a rework then.
I've only kind of watched just side-eyeing, like can't wait to see what happens to them. But yeah, that's the history of Dragoon in Final Fantasy XIV. That is our retrospect look complete. So hopefully you enjoyed. That was a really good video. Blast of the Past with Lancer and Dragoon. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned. We'll of course be doing this for.
I'm subscribed, but I'm now liking.
We don't really need to do this for like Dancer and Gunbreaker, but you know we have Ninja and Heavensward jobs, maybe even Stormblood jobs to see how they were when they first came out. But really, we'll be looking at all the oldest jobs first, all the A Realm Reborn ones. Anyway, with that, thank you for watching.
Thank you, Mr. Happy.
Share. You know the drill. And until next time, take care.
That was a goddamn really good video. That was a sick video. Mr. Happy, great job. I'm definitely going to watch more of these on stream. I hope you guys enjoyed, actually, as much as I did there. I know it took a while, but I feel like we had some fun in the process. You know what I mean?